The New York City Commission on Human Rights does not provide legal advice. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the views or position of the Commission.
Hello, New York. Welcome to another episode of Rights Here, Right Now. I'm your host, Jose Rios Lua, Chief of Staff at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. Rights Here, Rights Now airs the last Monday of every month on WHCR 90.3 FM. Each episode gives listeners the info they'll need to live, work, and thrive free from discrimination in our city. Today, we're going to be talking about the Commission's efforts to combat anti-Black racism and the Commission's recently announced landmark settlement in a source of income housing discrimination case. But before we jump into today's topics, here's a quick background on our agency. The New York City Commission on Human Rights is the city's agency that protects New Yorkers from discrimination in employment, housing, and public spaces. The Commission is charged with enforcing the city's human rights law, one of the broadest civil rights laws in the nation. The law prohibits discrimination against over 25 protected categories, such as race, age, gender, and sexuality. New Yorkers can report discrimination to the Commission by calling 212-416-0197 or visiting our website at nyc.gov/humanrights. The Commission also seeks to prevent discrimination by conducting outreach and educate New Yorkers on their rights and responsibilities. The Commission provides trainings and workshops that detail the protections enshrined in the law. Our trainings are grounded in the idea that our rights are interconnected and that we all have a role to play in advancing equity in New York City. You can request a training on our website at nyc.gov/humanrights. Before we jump into our first topic, which is anti-Black racism and the work in the Commission, we're going to play a brief audio for you about the work and the history of the Commission working to combat racism.
2024 marks 80 years since New York City recognized
that in order to address racial disparities, concrete action was needed.
Harlem had been the site of racial tension, police violence, and unrest
that flared in 1935 and again in 1943.
As in many cities across the country,
Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia took a step by creating the Mayor's Committee on Unity
to address citywide concerns about race relations and
make New York City a place where people of all races and religions
may work and live side by side in harmony
and have mutual respect for each other, and where democracy is a living reality.
The early days of the committee were met with challenges.
Members tried to effect change using persuasion,
but the committee lacked any teeth to bring about real change.
By the mid-1950s, it was clear that without legal enforcement powers,
the committee couldn't holistically address
the causes and manifestations of discrimination and bias in New York City.
As a result, the committee was reorganized and granted investigative authority.
The new permanent city agency was renamed the Commission on Intergroup Relations.
The Commission was given the power to
receive and investigate complaints,
initiate its own investigations,
hold hearings,
and make recommendations to the mayor.
And the Commission leveraged this mandate to study prejudice in New York City
and open channels of dialogue between racial, religious, and ethnic groups throughout the city.
This remains a core function of the Commission, which works daily to cultivate a culture of dignity and respect,
working with city agencies and communities.
The Commission made recommendations to the mayor and also worked with state and federal actors to develop
best practices in preventing and responding to acts of bias and discrimination.
The late 50s and 60s saw an increase in passage of city laws
to overtly tackle racial and ethnic discrimination and disparities, starting with housing.
As the Commission's authority expanded, its name was changed to better capture the wide breadth of its mandate.
In 1962, the agency became the Commission on Human Rights.
Complementing the change in name, in 1965,
the New York City human rights law was passed
and extended the Commission's jurisdiction to prosecute discrimination based on race, color, national origin, and other protected categories
in employment, public spaces, and housing.
In the years since, the Commission's own focus on anti-Black racism
has been informed by conversations agency staff had with Black New Yorkers.
Those insights guided our anti-Black racism report and helped us identify steps for strengthening our work to combat anti-Black racism.
We continue to examine the role racism has played in the 5 boroughs,
aiding in the fight for civil rights for years to come.
so that New York is a place where people can live, work, and thrive.
Free from discrimination.
That's right. As you just heard, the Commission's history is deeply rooted in combating racism in New York City. Our work can be traced as far back as the 1940s to address rising racial tensions, police violence, and unrest in the city. Since then, the Commission continues to be on the forefront of combating all forms of racism in the city. Most recently, the Commission has launched an anti-Black racism working group to explicitly make a work stream that focuses on preventing and addressing anti-Black racism, an agency-wide priority. The goal is to understand and combat the anti-Black racism that occurs in New York City more holistically. And leading that work stream is the Commission's Policy and Impact Advisor, Cataydra Brown. Cataydra, what is your favorite thing to do in New York City?
My all-time favorite thing to do in New York City is eat. I've been eating my way through the boroughs, and since we're talking about anti-Black racism today, we'll plug my favorite Black-owned restaurant in the city. It's called Rios. They're originally in Brooklyn. It's vegan Ethiopian food.
Yes.
And they just expanded to the West Village, so check it out.
I actually was just there recently for a friend's birthday. It almost feels like Ethiopian food and Mexican food, which is my culture, are like neighbors in food because the food is like so fresh. It's like the base of like tomatoes, onions, cilantro, like all of these peppers. Like it seems just so fresh, so delicious, and so highly recommend that as well. Ethiopian food is delicious.
Yes, absolutely.
I truly understand eating your way through the city. I had a friend here. We went all the way to Flushing to get the croissant rice balls. That was amazing.
That sounds so good.
So eating your way through the city is definitely a way to pass the time.
Especially in New York City where there are so many different ethnicities and cuisines. And I feel like eating our way through the city is very representative of what we try to do at the Commission in terms of promoting inclusivity and making sure that people with different identities and histories are seen and valued.
Bringing it closer to our topic, it's kind of like, especially when it comes to food, like you really, in a city like New York, have to try to stay sheltered as possible to not be exposed to other cultures, right? Mm-hmm. And so like no matter where you go, there you're going to find food from places that you may have never been but can experience part of the culture. And that's just part of being a globally diverse city. And that's what makes our city amazing.
Totally.
Cataydra, your voice was on the audio, and we originally started that audio for our Black History Month Poetry Slam event, which you hosted for us. So thank you for that. How does it feel hearing that on the radio?
Incredible. It's really amazing to see the impact of the video, to hear it back. As you mentioned, we did that in partnership with the Bowery Poetry Club, which was an amazing event that we had this past February, and we're really hoping to bring it back in years to come, where we really valued and emphasized Black voices and Black experiences through storytelling. And so really awesome to hear the audio again and all of the amazing work that the Commission has done to support Black communities across the city.
I'm so happy that you made time to be here so we can talk about this, because there's a lot of work that the agency is actually doing on the front of combating racism in general, but in particular anti-Black racism. Mm-hmm. And so where I'd like to start the conversation is talking a little bit about a term that's been used more and more. We've been hearing a lot of folks saying that they're striving to be anti-racist, mm-hmm. right? And so in the Commission, our work has always been founded in ensuring that racism has no place in New York City. And so I think there's a lot of people who think, I'm not racist. Mm-hmm. That's enough, right?
Right. Allies.
Allies. Great. That's a great word for it, right? Mm-hmm. But now into the narrative, we have this term of anti-racist. And so can we start a little bit there and tell me like what your understanding of being anti-racist is and what should folks know about that term?
Absolutely. So to be anti-racist is to truly believe that racism is everyone's problem and taking a stand and fighting against racism despite your background or privileges that you may have. We all have a role to play in being anti-racist, especially when it comes to anti-Black racism in New York City. And simply putting it, anti-racism is recognizing that racism is around us and perpetuates us in our daily lives, even if we're not directly impacted by it, and choosing to stand up against it.
It's one of those things where just knowing that it exists is not enough.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we've known racism has existed for decades, centuries, millennia. We're getting to a point in the social narrative where just recognizing that racism is a thing without action is almost complicit.
Yes.
Especially for agencies like ours who are actively striving to be more and more anti-racist.
And just adding on to a point that you said, if you're an ally and you're not being anti-racist, you're being complicit and aligning yourself with white supremacy and historically things that are harmful and negatively impactful for communities of color. So absolutely.
Some folks listening might think, I should care about just racism. Why should I specifically care about anti-Black racism? Racism as a whole is obviously not okay, but there is something specifically sinister in the makeup of our country, of our city, and of our culture that comes with anti-Black racism in particular, right? So can we talk a little bit about what is anti-Black racism and how we define it at the Commission?
Absolutely. So anti-Black racism is a term that highlights the ways in which Black people and communities experience racism in particular. And again, while there are many different racial and ethnic groups that experience prejudice and racism across the city and across this country, the term anti-Black racism specifically underscores the experiences of Black communities.
To the people that say, like, why do I need to care about anti-Black racism? I'm not Black. Why do I need to care about anti-Black racism? And I think people need to pause and realize that it's baked into institutions. It's baked into ways of life, right? And so that's why we all have to care about it. For something that has been ingrained so long in society, it's going to take effort and time and really buy-in and partnership from everyone to be able to stop it.
We are better together. We are more powerful in numbers. And this is the importance of really supporting and uplifting Black community through anti-Black racism. Again, there are many different groups that experience racism and prejudice. And we know from history's past that when we come together as true allies and true activists, we can get to solutions that are more powerful and impactful for different communities.
Before we dive in specifically into the working group, I know the working group is relatively new to the agency, but is this the first time the Commission has worked on anti-Black racist initiatives, or what is the history there?
Absolutely. So as you all may have heard from the video, the Commission has been around for over 80 years. And actually, our history begins from protests in Harlem, where we were trying to support Black communities during times of riot and racial unrest and tensions. So that's the start of our agency, but we've also done and have had a number of initiatives over the past few years that really focus on anti-Black racism. I'm going to highlight 3 for you all this afternoon. The first one being You Do It With Your Heart, which was a Black business solidarity initiative that highlighted the economic power of Black New Yorkers and the cultural significance of Black-owned businesses across the city, which, as we all know, have been a long cornerstone of New York City neighborhoods. The second initiative I will highlight is the While Black campaign, which really addressed some of the common forms of discrimination that Black folks faced in day-to-day activities, affirmed the rights of all Black New Yorkers to live their lives free from discrimination and racism, and also provided information on how to report discrimination for Black communities at the Commission. And the last thing that I'll talk about and want to spend a little bit of time here because it will segue really nicely into the Anti-Black Racism Working Group, but is our report that we actually published in the summer of 2020 following the murder of George Floyd. We published the Black New Yorkers and Their Experiences with Anti-Black Racism report, which was a culmination of many years of research. And we did this through 19 focus groups. We heard specifically the perspectives of over close to 200 Black New Yorkers from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, who spoke about their experiences of racism in their lives. And the main objective of that project was really to determine strategies in reducing anti-Black racism, both for the Commission and also across the city.
In a world where someone in the city is supposed to be doing this work, we're excited, proud, and ready to do this kind of work. Going into the working group, as I mentioned in the intro, you are leading this work for the agency. We're really, really thankful for your leadership in this work and the thoughtfulness that you've been putting into this work. I think I've had over the past almost 2 years now the opportunity to work closer with you on this project, and it's interesting to see how your leadership is developing with this particular project, because I think you bring to it a holistic lens of seeing all of the different pieces, but also like recognizing what you don't know and bringing in people who are filling those gaps of things that you don't know. So I want to talk a little bit about what's the goal of having this group for the agency.
Sure, and I will just give a little bit of context. So the New York City human rights law actually prohibits discrimination based off of race, color, ethnicity, and national origin. And at the Commission, it's our responsibility to make sure that we enforce those protections for communities and also educate New Yorkers about their rights and protections underneath the law. Segueing into the Anti-Black Racism Working Group, one of the biggest goals is really trying to inform the Commission's different units and efforts in this space. We have a few different units, so this includes informing the work of our Law Enforcement Bureau, our Community Relations Bureau, our Policy and External Affairs team, as well as our Communications team. And as you mentioned, it's also an opportunity for our staffers from the inside to look within and really critically examine the agency's work with the goal of ensuring that every single thing that we do is intentional, deliberate, and in support of anti-Black racism in New York City.
That's amazing. So you mentioned quite a few different departments in our agency. So who actually is a part of this? Like, what departments of the agency are a part of this?
Absolutely. So this working group is actually inclusive of all agencies. We have representatives from HR. We have folks from the policy team. We have folks from the Community Relations Bureau, folks from the Law Enforcement Bureau, the Communications team, and I think threadlining to something that I referred to earlier, we are better together. And it is so important to have representatives from all of the units come, because not only are they experts in the work that they do, but they also will provide a very unique perspective based off of their understanding of their units.
And I think also like their lived experience, right? Bringing that to the work of what, not only what they do at the Commission, but also like
how they exist in New York City.
Exactly. And I think that's like really an important perspective. What's some exciting or some work that you're excited about that's coming out of the working group right now?
Absolutely. So there are a few things, very exciting work coming down the pipeline. We are hoping that this working group has both internal and external impacts. So externally, we really want to strengthen our visibility and our reach for Black New Yorkers, especially considering that we know that underreporting for discrimination is a major concern for communities of color, specifically the Black community in New York City. And internally, we really wanted an opportunity as an agency to bring together different team members across different units to collaborate and brainstorm of areas of opportunities where we could be maximizing our impact for Black New Yorkers, really thinking about how we break intra-agency silos and come together in pursuit of one vision. But this is all really awesome because we're hoping that this working group is an agency-wide focus and priority for calendar years and fiscal years to come. And again, looking forward to better reaching Black New Yorkers through exciting new initiatives and programs, including new media campaigns, events, and making data-informed decisions so we know that we're meeting folks at least halfway.
One of the initiatives that I'm excited to see come out of the working group is one that we've talked about over the past couple of episodes of the radio show, is the survey.
Yes, the survey.
The survey, I think, is an amazing thing that came out of the initial working of the working group and now is informing the larger working of the agency. So can we talk a little bit about the survey?
Sure. So the survey is, again, a way for us to better reach New Yorkers. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from the ways that you experience discrimination in your day-to-day lives. You can actually reach the survey by going to nyc.gov/togethernyc. You can take the survey. It'll take you a few minutes, and we're using all of the data that we're getting from the survey to inform our strategic plan moving forward as an agency. For example, if we see that there's a certain zip code where there's a predominant number of Black people who experience discrimination in public accommodations or in hospitals, that's an opportunity for us to put our heads together as the working group to be like, okay, how do we deploy our Community Relations Bureau to do more trainings for medical providers in that space? How do we get more folks from the neighborhoods to come to us and report their experiences of discrimination? And how do we, again, educate New Yorkers on their rights and protections of the law?
There's another piece that I want to talk a little bit about, because the working group is not the only thing that the commission is doing in the workflow of being anti-racist. I know we're also working on our racial equity plan. And so you're also instrumental in that process as well. And so I don't know if you wanted to spend some time talking a little bit about what is the racial equity plan, why we're doing it, and what we hope to get out of it.
Absolutely. So again, this work has been a long time coming for the city, and especially under Mayor Adams' leadership. So a couple of years ago in 2022, New Yorkers actually voted for the establishment of the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice. And through the creation of that new office, many city agencies are required to develop a racial equity plan. So we've been doing this in very close partnership with both the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice as well as the Commission on Racial Equity. And our plan is 10 years in the making. So it's requiring us to think about short, medium, and long-term goals, outcomes, metrics, strategies, and indicators for how we will actively be anti-racist as an agency. And it comes in great timing. I think pairing this with the working group will make our efforts so much stronger. Yeah. And now we have a vehicle to really see our strategies through. And so it's been very exciting work doing this racial equity plan with you.
It's really exciting to see the work that we normally do be a little bit more interconnected with the other workings of the city.
Absolutely.
As large. So on a personal level, why is it important to you to be a part of this type of work?
I'm a native New Yorker, first and foremost. And I've seen the ways that racism, discrimination, prejudice has impacted me and my personal and professional career, as well as those around me, family members, friends. This work is so critical and so instrumental. And before coming to the commission, I actually didn't really know much about the commission. And it's been so beautiful and eye-opening to be able to support a bigger vision of not only bringing different communities together to learn more about each other's identities and cultures, but also working to dismantle systemic and institutional racism and prejudice, both for communities that look like me and others.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think we are very fortunate to work at a place where people choose to come to this agency because they're passionate about the work. And as we interview more of our colleagues on the show, I want to get a little bit more into what's that passion that drives us to do the work. Because in many ways, we see ourselves, our families, our communities reflected in the work that we do.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
I hope that you will come back as the work progresses to give us updates on the working group's work and, of course, on the racial equity plan. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on into our next segment, we're going to talk about a landmark settlement by the Commission in housing discrimination. But before that, we're going to do a little refresher on source of income discrimination.
Source of income discrimination occurs when a housing provider denies an applicant or mistreats a tenant because they have a voucher. Vouchers include local, state, and federal housing assistance programs such as Section 8, FEPS, HASA, and many more. Source of income discrimination has been illegal under New York City's human rights law since 2008. The law prohibits landlords, brokers, or real estate agents from advertising no vouchers are accepted, accepting only one kind of voucher, or refusing or delaying repairs for tenants because their rent is paid through vouchers. Housing is crucial for our communities to thrive. For many New Yorkers, vouchers are the key to stable housing. To learn more or report a violation, visit nyc.gov/voucherspaynyc or call 212-416-0197. Vouchers pay. Discrimination doesn't.
That is the cool voice of our agency's social media and marketing manager, Khalil Waldron, who is the magic behind this radio show. You never hear him on the mic, but he is working the soundboard. So thanks, Khalil. Shout out to Khalil. The New York City Commission on Human Rights recently announced the largest civil rights settlement in the city's history for a housing discrimination case. The landmark settlement will hold Parkchester's property management company and landlords accountable for discriminating against voucher holders. The commission imposed $1 million in civil penalties and secured 850 apartments to be set aside for voucher holders. Joining me today to talk about this historic settlement and the work behind it is the Commission's Deputy Commissioner of Law Enforcement, Katherine Carroll. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Last time you were here, I think you were talking about disability in housing. For this time, as we like to start every segment off in every interview, maybe you would like to share something else that you love doing in the city.
I have to say, I really was feeling the food conversation in the first segment, and that's where I was going to go. But I think today is, as I understand, National Dog Day.
Ooh.
So I'm just going to say all the dog parks, dog vibes in the city, especially in the summer, makes me very happy.
I can't remember what park it is, but it's probably in multiple parks. But my favorite thing to do around Halloween time is to go see the dog Halloween costume walks.
Yes.
And just to see how the parks are filled with like dogs in their costumes. And I just think it's the most adorable thing.
And the matching costumes that the people wear.
Yes, 100%. The people, the dogs and the people, they take it seriously.
Absolutely.
Congratulations, Deputy Commissioner. Kathy, when you were here before, you were the assistant commissioner for a long time, just overseeing the housing work as the assistant commissioner. And then due to a need at the agency, really just overseeing all of the work at the agency. And so it should be to no surprise to everyone that you are now the deputy commissioner of the Law Enforcement Bureau. So congratulations on this accomplishment.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot. I'm really excited and proud that this opportunity has come this way and that the commissioner has given me the opportunity to do this work. You know, I've been at the agency for a really long time, and I'm really excited to be able to lead this section of the agency.
And the timing on this could not be better, because if anybody wants to ask us, why is Katherine Carroll the correct person to be in this role, we just need to point to the Parkchester settlement. You've been working on this for a while.
Yes, we've been working on it for quite some time. And I think part of what led to the landmark settlement was that we really took our time building a very strong case that covered several individual complainants, members of the public that came to us with this complaint, and also working in partnership with Fair Housing Justice Center, who'd been doing their own investigation and then filed a complaint with us. And so working in partnership with them, we were really able to build a foolproof case that allowed us to settle for this landmark amount and for the set-asides that we were able to get.
I want to go a little bit deeper into that partnership with Fair Justice Housing Center. But before that, I want to start us off with just a little bit of a refresher. I know we've talked about it before, but for anyone who is not familiar, what is source of income discrimination?
So source of income discrimination it's kind of a misnomer because, you know, most people in the city do have a source of income, but this specifically is defined to prohibit discrimination on the basis of anyone attempting to pay their rent with any sort of government subsidy or government funds. So the most notable versions of that are Section 8 or City FEPS or HASA vouchers, but it also encompasses people who rely on Social Security or public assistance to help pay their rent.
I've heard urban legends of a source of income discrimination beginning because lawyers didn't want to disclose to their landlords, or people didn't want to rent out to lawyers because they're litigious people. And I think that in of its own is discrimination. We work with some of the best lawyers in the world.
Absolutely.
And we love lawyers. This has been illegal for quite some time. It's been around, I think, since 2008?
2008.
And then was later expanded because originally it wasn't applicable to all housing units, right? It was only applicable to units that had a specific parameter or specific number of units.
That's right. It used to be that any landlord who only had 5 units or less that they were renting in the city were exempt from this. But in 2019, I believe, the statute was amended so that any landlord who's renting and advertising their units is also under the jurisdiction of this section of the statute.
And that's huge because that means it pretty much means any housing unit in the city has to comply with this statute of the law.
Absolutely.
So going into the Parkchester case a little bit, what were the violations in the Parkchester case that were part of this settlement?
So I think what's interesting to note about source of income discrimination is that it's really evolved since the statute went into effect. I think for the first, 5-7 years, there were just very clear per se violations of landlords saying no vouchers, I'm not going to rent to someone with Section 8. And landlords and brokers have really become more sophisticated in their ways of attempting to keep people with public sources of income from being able to rent in their properties. And so we've seen the implementation of policies such as minimum income requirements to have the net effect of keeping people with vouchers from being able to be eligible to rent a units when really their voucher should make them exempt from these policies. So, for example, if I have a Section 8 voucher and the government is going to be paying 100% of my rent each month, there's no reason for a landlord to need to know what additional income I have, because all they should be concerned about is whether they're going to get their rent on a monthly basis. And since the government's going to be paying it, they have that guarantee without me having to justify my income. And so in instances where we see these minimum income requirements being applied across the board, no matter whether someone has a subsidy or a voucher, then we view that as pretext for source of income discrimination. And one of those policies was what was at issue in the Parkchester case.
What is a per se violation?
So a per se violation is where basically there's no investigation necessary, because just on its face, as written, it's a violation of the law. So I think frequently when we talk about source of income discrimination, people get a little caught up in the technicalities of all the different programs and where the rent is coming from. And so to try and simplify it, we talk about it in terms of other protected classes. So for example, if a landlord were to post an ad that said, no women need apply, that's a per se violation. Obviously, they're saying no one who identifies as a woman is eligible for this apartment. That's clearly discrimination on the basis of gender. And similarly, in the cases of race, I think these kinds of things are baked into anti-discrimination laws, just like you and Cataydra were talking about. Our statute, our agency is based in this anti-racism work. And so I always try to tie back this explanation to that kind of example, because that really hits home for a lot of people. They understand race discrimination, gender discrimination in a way that maybe source of income seems a little opaque. One
of my goals with the radio show is to make our work a little bit more accessible to people. So thanks for explaining per se violation. And now when you all say it around me, I can actually confidently know what that means. A lot of phrases have been thrown around since last Thursday. Highest ever civil penalty ordered by the commission, highest number of set-aside apartments. How does that feel? Well, first, let me start with this. You started with this case.
Well, I started with this case, but this case didn't start with me, I should say. There's been, this case was with us for quite some time, a very intense investigation, and really the case almost went to trial. So we've, for anyone who's experienced litigation, the years that can go into building something like that. But there have been generations, waves, however you want to call it, of staff attorneys and supervising attorneys at the agency who helped get this case to where it is. So I first just have to shout out all of them, everyone who did any sort of review of applications and data and helped us frame the argument we were going to make. This case would not have gotten to the point without all of the hard work of the staff attorneys in the law enforcement bureau. So that's really special, because I think sometimes it takes a long time to see something this spectacular come to fruition, and being able to share all of this with the folks who, some of whom are no longer with the agency, some of whom have left New York, but who are all really excited about the contribution they were able to make to this case.
In this particular topic, it's also really important to acknowledge the contributions of some of the staff that you have who are non-attorneys in this field as well, because you have a team of interventionists who can help intervene with specifically source of income cases, right? And who can help secure that apartment viewing in those pieces. And so not everything has to be a Parkchester. Not everything has to be a complaint that you file. I still am having a hard time wrapping my brain around 850.
I know. It's amazing.
I know I said the number. I almost said the number wrong at the beginning, but 850 apartments set aside for voucher holders. Can we actually, I think we talk about set asides because we know what they are, but can we talk a little bit about when we talk, say, set asides, what we're talking about?
Sure. So the concept of a set aside is meant to get a landlord back into the place they would have been in terms of the makeup of their tenancy if they hadn't discriminated in the first place. So we're asking landlords to hold out a certain portion of their portfolio to rent specifically to people who have vouchers. I think People frequently ask, well, isn't that discrimination in and of itself? But it's a common tactic used in relief and anti-discrimination cases to try and rectify the historical discrimination that's gone on. So we know that people who have public sources of income have been applying to Parkchester for decades, and they've been turned away because of these, discriminatory policies. And so what we're trying to do with the set-asides is basically course correct and get back to where they would have been with the demographics of their portfolio in the complex if they hadn't discriminated in the first place.
So does that mean that right now, there are 850 units available at Parkchester?
No.
For
It would be amazing, but no, not in this climate in New York City.
Fair. So how does the agency come about enforcing that 850 set-asides?
For each case where we have negotiated set-asides, we're working with the landlord to figure out whatever works best for their business model and how they're seeking applicants. So in some instances, we'll set a period of time where a landlord will notify us of every vacancy they have that falls under the voucher payment standards, and we'll identify an applicant for that apartment. In this case, Parkchester is a very popular place to live, and they have wait lists for units that are hundreds upon hundreds of people long. So we're working a scheme where they're taking 2 people who have public sources of income for every person who has employment income and kind of balancing the wait lists like that.
With these types of agreements, does the commission just kind of like sign on the dotted line and then we trust that those 850 set-asides will be respected? Or is there like reporting or monitoring that go into place for this?
They have to report back to us I believe it's every quarter, but it might be every 6 months in this case. The number of people who have subsidies that have moved in, they have to provide us the original documents so that we can verify. I think trust but verify is how we operate always with these kinds of things. We want to believe that people are going to comply with the agreements, but we wouldn't be doing our service to the people of New York if we weren't making sure that the terms of these agreements that we spend so long negotiating are actually being complied with. So
this actual settlement is not the end of the work.
No.
I think that's important for people to know, because they think that once we have a settlement, they think that's it, we're done. But there's monitoring and reporting and work that the commission continues to engage with after the settlement. You mentioned Fair Housing Justice Center at the beginning, and this work was actually possible in part because of the collaboration with Fair Housing Justice Center. Can you talk a little bit about the work with Fair Housing Justice Center? And then I want to talk a little bit about the landscape of how organizations can work with the commission or file with the commission as well.
Fair Housing Justice Center is an organization that's been around for decades, and they do testing and investigations to weed out not only sources of income discrimination, but discrimination under every protected class considered in New York City and at the state and federal level. And then they bring those cases in federal, state court, as well as working with administrative agencies like ours. And this case happened to be working in parallel. They were doing testing and investigations with Parkchester at the same time that the commission was being notified by members of the public that they were being discriminated against. And so Fair Housing Justice Center filed a complaint as an organization identifying the discrimination that their tests had borne out. And then after the investigation into the individual cases was completed, we worked with the Council for Fair Housing Justice Center really in partnership to build this case out. On its face, it may seem like it's a very straightforward situation, but we had over 10 individual complainants that were involved, and we had Fair Housing Justice Center with all of their testers as witnesses. And not to get into the nitty-gritty too much, but with this amount of data that we were looking at, we had to hire statistical experts to get in and help work through all of those cases and the applications that we were looking at to make the determination that discrimination had occurred. So really working in partnership, and the resources they were able to bring to us and the expertise that they have in this area was really a boon for us as an agency, and also a great opportunity for some of our newer attorneys to really see what that kind of work looks like, sometimes on a federal level. But it's a very successful partnership, I would say.
So I know that people can contact the agency, us, and they can report discrimination, and they can file a claim of discrimination, a complaint of discrimination with us. Can organizations do the same?
Yes. The statute allows for organizations who have, on behalf of their members or through something like their own investigations, have uncovered discrimination, and they can file those complaints with us and then work in tandem with us if a case is going to go to litigation to ensure that their interests as well as the city's interests are being met through a resolution. I think some member-based organizations that are advocating on behalf of people in certain protected classes are a good example of the type of organization that can file a complaint. They, have firsthand knowledge based on their clientele or their members of things that might be happening that are in violation of the law. And if those members don't want to come forward and file their own cases, the organization can use their firsthand knowledge of what's happened to their members to be able to file their own complaint and bring it to the attention of the city.
What kind of impact do you think this settlement is going to have on housing discrimination as a whole in the city?
My optimistic point of view is that it's going to establish that, these kinds of policies that may appear neutral on their face are really things that are clearly discriminatory, and things that, the agency and other civil rights organizations are going to continue to pursue to establish that they do create source of income discrimination. Our goal is to find ways to work with landlords and work with brokers to make sure that they are not violating the law and that people are getting into housing when they're eligible to get into that housing. And so our hope is that, this will be kind of a warning for things to come in future settlements. And if we take a case through to trial, the potential penalties that could be awarded after a trial. But our preference is to be able to have these conversations early on, to encourage people to come to our trainings, understand the confines of the law, ask questions about how they can operate within those confines, and to talk to us about policies that maybe they don't even realize are discouraging or keeping people with vouchers from being eligible for units.
What kind of impact do you think this case is going to have on your work and the work of the unit?
I hope on a very individualized basis that for our staff, this will be something that they can be proud of and something that they can rely on in trying to negotiate other cases, and also see as a really exciting thing to work on for a lawyer. This case for me was one of the most fun things I've done in my career, despite the discrimination that we were fighting, but the team aspect of it and really working together to think creatively about ways to root out discrimination is one of the best things about my job and the work that we do in the agency. And I'm hopeful that, by pointing out the potential penalties that exist, we'll be getting people more proactively cooperating with us and finding ways to not violate the law and get people into housing, because that's ultimately our goal when we're talking about source of income discrimination.
If there are any landlords, realtors, brokers who are listening to this and are saying to themselves, I actually don't know what the laws or the rules are, what would you encourage them to do?
Well, first, I would say go to our website. We have some really helpful FAQs that talk about what is and isn't source of income discrimination. And I think it's a good starting place because we point out some of the common things that we hear that are problematic. In addition to that, we're always open to hearing questions and do our best to answer them. And we have regular trainings, both virtual and in person, that go specifically into source of income discrimination. So if you are interested in one of those trainings, you can contact our office and we'd be more than happy to talk through those questions and see, hopefully that we can collaborate.
Realtors specifically, I want to put in a plug that if you need 1.5 continuing education credits, we offer those for free. Through our partnership with Fordham, we have a training that we offer at our office. You can get those continuing education credits for free through us, and they're usually really expensive courses. So definitely take us up on that offer and sign up for those. Okay, now for anyone who is a tenant, a potential tenant, just your average New Yorker who might think they've experienced source of income discrimination, what would you say to them? What should they do?
Please contact us as soon as possible. I think you can contact us through our general info line number that Khalil mentioned at the top, or you can email us at vdiscrimination@cchr.nyc.gov, and that goes directly to our source of income unit that's doing on-the-ground interventions to try and get people into housing as soon as possible. So if something happened and you think it's discrimination, please reach out to us as soon as possible so that we can try to intervene as long as the apartment is still available. That's why it's so important to get in touch really fast.
Deputy Commissioner of Law Enforcement, Katherine Carroll, thank you for joining me. I promise I will bring you back on something that's not housing.
I love housing.
But thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations on the settlement.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's all we have for you today, folks. Again, if you have experienced or witnessed discrimination, contact the Commission to report it. You can report discrimination online on our website, nyc.gov/human rights, or by calling us at 212-416-0197. Thank you for tuning in to Rights Here, Right Now. Remember that we all must work together to create a city where all New Yorkers can live, work, and thrive, free from discrimination. Until next time.